For our entire lives, we've all been asking the same question, right? What is the meaning of it all? What's the point? Well, I think I found the best answer I've ever heard. And believe it or not, it's only 2 words.
Stop looking. That's it. That's the answer. Because that frantic, endless search for some hidden meaning, that's the very thing causing us so much anxiety.
So let's just flip this whole thing on its head. What if you've been asking the wrong question all along? What if meaning isn't something you find, like some hidden treasure, but something you actually build, piece by piece, with the raw materials of your own life? Okay, let's really dig into this. To understand this shift in perspective, we're gonna look at the incredible life of an 11th century poet named Su Shi. His life shows us that our most profound growth, it doesn't come from the answers we find. It comes from the hardships we are forced to endure.
I mean, you probably see it this way, right? You think pain and heartbreak and failure are just roadblocks, these obstacles you have to get past to finally find your real purpose. But that's the big misconception.
This one idea, it reframes everything. The good moments? Sure, of course. But also the tears, the frustrations, the times you felt completely lost, those aren't detours from your life. They are your life. They are the essential, irreplaceable building blocks of your meaning. So let's look at the first type of building block, and it's one of the hardest we all face: separation. How do we handle the pain of parting with people we love? Su Shi's story offers such a powerful lesson here. Okay, so picture this. It's 1061. Su Shi has to leave his brother, Su Shi, for a new government job. And these two, they were inseparable. They'd grown up studying together, passing the same exams, never even imagining a life apart. And so their first farewell was just raw. They both wept uncontrollably, terrified that time would fly by and they might never ever see each other again. Now, let's fast forward 36 years, a whole lifetime later. Su Shi is 62 and he's being exiled to this remote island, which was pretty much a death sentence back then. His brother travels to see him one last time, but this parting is completely different. Instead of tears, Su Shi calmly invites his distraught brother for a bowl of noodles. He eats heartily and tells him that, reunions and partings are just part of life, and we have to learn to let them go. A lifetime of goodbyes had transformed his youthful fear into this profound, incredible peace. And this is the crucial realization he had. Life is a journey. The idea is that we are all just temporary travelers, kind of like we're staying at the same inn for a little while. We meet, we share a path, and then we part. And seeing it that way, it just removes the sting of goodbye. The goal isn't to prevent the parting, but to cherish the time you have together. But what about the deeper wounds? The ones left by betrayal and injustice? Well, Su Shi's story also shows us how our ugliest scars can actually become our greatest sources of strength. This guy's life was just one relentless attack after another. When he pointed out that new laws were hurting poor people, he was accused of treason. When he was home mourning his own father, he was slandered for smuggling. His beautiful poetry was twisted by his enemies, taken completely out of context, and used as evidence to have him thrown in prison. He had every single reason to be consumed by bitterness. And for a time he was. He wrote poems filled with this deep resentment, a feeling of lonely bitterness. He was human, after all, and he was deeply wounded by the constant, unfair attacks. But over time, he developed this path to healing. He learned to reframe the injury as just another experience. He chose to forgive, and this is so important, not for them, but for himself. And the proof of his transformation? Years later, after the very man who exiled him was himself disgraced, Su Shi wrote a letter to the man's son, urging him to care for his father in his old age. Just wow. He learned that a scar isn't a weakness, it's proof of healing. It's the very place where you were broken that has now become the strongest part of you. And this brings us to the final and maybe the greatest challenge of all. How do we live in a world where nothing is certain, where everything can just change in an instant? His life was the definition of impermanence. One moment, he was a celebrated genius at the heart of the empire. The next, he was this impoverished exile so toxic that old friends would literally cross the street just to avoid him. His fortunes rose and fell like a violent tide. And through all of this, he discovered a fundamental truth about life's storms. Fighting them is useless. The more you resist the uncontrollable currents of fate, the more you thrash and struggle, the faster you get pulled under into the whirlpool. But If you can stop fighting, relax, and learn to float, the current will eventually carry you to shore. His secret weapon was acceptance. It didn't matter if he was banished to a muddy village, a town known for plagues, or that barren island with no fresh food. He made a choice. He chose to find peace right where he was. He farmed his own food, explored nature, wrote poetry, and made friends. He realized home wasn't a place on a map. It was a state of inner peace.
So, what does this all mean for us? What is the best answer to life's meaning? Well, it's not some sentence you can write down. It's something you've been building all along. Think about it. Every single time you failed, every time you felt like you weren't enough, every painful parting that taught you somehow how to love more deeply, every wound, every betrayal that you learned how to heal from, those things were not interruptions. They were your life. The meaning you've been looking for isn't out there somewhere. It is the sum total of everything you've been through. It's what has built the person you are right now. That is the answer. So I'll leave you with just this one question. Take a quiet look at your own journey. Which of your scars has made you the most beautiful?
Subscribe for daily wisdom.